Well, last week was like a sort of introduction to the series. So we've been and will continue to be watching a video series of a parenting class from Andy Stanley, who's in the Atlanta area. I don't actually know where his church is, but Atlanta is the right answer. And he has some great things to say about parenting, and I think came from the suggestion of y'all. So thanks y'all for making me aware of it so we could share it with the church and sort of walk through this together. Like I said last week, I'm not a parent, so I'm not here to be the primary facilitator of this conversation because that would be of no help to anybody. But I'm here to be sort of our IT help and our timekeeper and sort of like that. So thanks to all the rest of you who are here to help facilitate the conversation and sort of be resources for each other and for the wider church. And like I said, I'm recording this. We have lots of parents who are actively parenting right now. And so they are not able to get on Zoom because their kids are in Sunday school or they have things going on or they're just in the wild west of being a parent. And so we record this and I post it to the children's ministry page for some of our parents and post it onto YouTube so that they can watch it later. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't share or that we're going to share your secrets with the world, but it just means that if you're busy and got things going on a Sunday morning, that's completely part of being an adult in the world these days. And so we record these for later watching. So with that, we are going to watch a couple of different clips today to sort of facilitate our conversation and start us off from a continuation of the video we watched last week. So last week sort of set us up for this conversation of like real versus ideal and sort of setting the standards and seeing kind of where we want to rise to, but also kind of setting realistic expectations for ourselves. And we kind of left off on a cliffhanger within the class last week where we talked a lot about not being afraid of your children and, committing to the relationship with your kids before committing to other things and the importance of your kids' happiness versus like their success on the baseball team. And then we sort of left off on a cliffhanger talking about marriage. And so marriage is going to be the primary focus of what he talks about today. And it's going to feel a little bit jumpy because he does a fantastic Bible study in the middle. It's great. You can learn so much from it. It's 15 minutes long and we don't have time for it right now. So we're going to jump around it, but it doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile. And if you want to go back and watch that, I can send out the link to the rest of the video that we're going to skip a little bit in the middle of. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and start with our first clip. So you all should be able to see Andy Stanley right now. And here we go. We're going to watch 2 minutes and then we'll pause and jump around and stick with me through a little bit of jumpiness this morning, but he has some great things to say.
Today, as we got to know these families through the years, through multiple years, we noticed that all of them had what we would consider healthy marriages. Not perfect, because there is no perfect marriage, but healthy. In fact, we walked away from those multiple conversations convinced that perhaps the best parenting tool of all, perhaps the best gift we could give our children was a healthy marriage. And for some of you, that's when you put down your pen and that's when you stop taking notes. I understand that, because if a healthy marriage is part of the parenting equation, if it's an important part of the parenting equation, that's bad news for you, discouraging news for you, because it's out of reach for you. In fact, it's so discouraging, and I've been doing this for so long, it's so discouraging that honestly, I was tempted to skip this part of the series. As you can imagine, it would be easier to just leave marriage out of a conversation about parenting. And you know this, for years, there's been a push to do just that, to divorce parenting from marriage. And honestly, the parenting conversation is certainly easier, it's more comfortable, it's more politically correct if we just set aside the notion of the nuclear family, a phrase that we don't use that much anymore. The nuclear family is simply a father and a mother and children all living together under one roof. It's easier to isolate parenting to a standalone topic. But to do that, and here's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, to isolate parenting from marriage is actually to steal something valuable from the current and the next generation. To isolate parenting from marriage is to steal something valuable from your children and your grandchildren. To do so is to remove, well, it's not only to remove the bullseye, it's like removing the entire target. And hopefully that will become clear in the next few minutes.
Okay, that's clip 1. And then we're going to go to clip 2.
Back to parenting in marriage. Let's get maybe uncomfortably specific. Here's the ideal. Ideal is parents raising children together under one roof. Communities don't raise children. Parents raise children. Communities are simply the context for raising children. And in communities, whether they're rural, urban, or suburban, communities where the nuclear family is the exception rather than the rule, you know what happens. The government is forced to step in and help raise children. Local schools are forced to feed children. Agencies are created to protect children. We all know that. And we all want better than that. We want better than that for each other, and we want better than that for the next generation. Communities don't raise kids, but they certainly set expectations for kids, for good or for bad. It's why some of you have gone to great lengths and honestly great expense to ensure that your children are being raised in a community that affirms your values. And this is so important. And you are to be celebrated for this. You've gone to great lengths to make sure that your kids are being raised in communities that affirm your values, even when your particular situation falls short of what you value. And you are to be so commended for that. In fact, we have designed our churches to partner with you in that process. We want better for your kids because you want better for your kids. You don't want to be told that everything is fine so that you'll feel better about yourself because you're smart and you love your kids and you know better. So every once in a while, we all need to be reminded of what should be and what could be. Maybe not what can be for us, but what could and should be for our children. That's good parenting. Every once in a while, we all need to be coaxed back into the tension between what's real and what's ideal. So, when it comes to parenting, marriage matters. And any attempt to downplay the importance of marriage, to downplay its role, it's just misguided, not because of the dynamic it creates within a particular family, but because it robs children of an opportunity to aspire for and to decide toward the ideal. Now, I think, again, one of the reasons that I have so much energy around this is something that happened to me about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I had a conversation that brought this entire dynamic into very, very sharp focus, this dynamic between real and ideal in marriage and parenting. Sandra and I met a gentleman named Rick. Actually, I met him first. Rick is about my age. His family situation growing up was extremely unhealthy, chaotic, and at times, he would say, dangerous. By the age of 13, Rick had had enough, and he was planning to run away from home. He told his uncle, who was disabled, he told his uncle what he was planning to do. And his uncle urged him, said, wait, let's talk about this. And his uncle explained to him that the state of Georgia, would help him, provide him with a place to live, predictable meals, a consistent roof over his head. So his uncle, he said, cashed his welfare check to pay for a cab, and he and Rick, who was 13 years old, taxied over to the DFACS office. His uncle dropped him off. Rick did not wait to be taken out of his home. He opted out himself, and he was placed in a temporary foster home. Later, he moved to a children's home. And he was eventually placed with a family in Gwinnett County, which is a county just north of the city of Atlanta, where he says his life was changed forever. Now, Rick and I had a long lunch, and he told me his entire story in detail. But toward the end of the story, he said something that honestly, it altered the trajectory of our family's life. He said this, he said, Andy, until I went to live with the Price family, the family in Gwinnett County. He said, until I went to live with that family, I had never seen a family sit around a table for dinner without arguing and screaming. He said, I'd never seen a man come home from work with a paycheck. He said, I'd never seen a father provide for his family. And he said, just seeing that was life-changing for me. And then he said this, and I wrote it down because it had such an impact on me. And I quote, he said this, he said, I just needed to see it to aim for it. I just needed to see it to aim for it. Once I saw it and experienced it, I knew what I wanted at 13 years old. I knew what I wanted. Until then, I didn't even know such a thing even existed.
That's clip 2 of 3. We have one more, and then we will sort of dive into a discussion.
And here's really the point of this opening session of this series. To do or to support anything that removes ideal from the equation, the conversation, the culture, to downplay the importance of parents raising kids together simply because it seems too ideal, too American, too Western, too traditional, to remove that from the equation because it's too ideal is stealing. It's stealing the future of our future generation. It's a mistake that we will pay for 4 generations. And make no mistake, women and children will pay the highest price. They always do. So yeah, it was tempting. It was tempting to just jump right into some parenting tips. That would have been easier, safer, certainly less potential to be misunderstood. But that would have been irresponsible because parenting is first and foremost about preparing our children for their future, which requires us to cast a compelling vision for their future, what could and should be for them, regardless of where our lives have taken us. A vision for them academically, financially, spiritually, but maybe most importantly, relationally. Our shortcomings as parents, and we all have them, right? Our shortcomings, if we leverage them wisely, can serve as a catalyst for our children to climb to heights that perhaps are out of reach for us. And if they do, that's a win. It's a win for them, and it's a win for us. It's a win for our community. So while we navigate what's real, let's not give up on ideal. And let's instill a dream in the hearts and minds of this next generation that positions them to live better lives and perhaps make the world a better place. And let's resist. Let's resist the voices in culture that have the potential to steal the dream of family from our kids. There will always be a tension between what's real and what's ideal, and we dare not resolve it. To resolve it is to lose something. So when it comes to family, let's resolve not to resolve that tension. Let's live in it. Let's parent in it. Let's follow Jesus through it. After all, he came and he made his dwelling among us, and he was full of grace and truth.
Okay, so that was a lot as usual. He throws a lot at you sort of all at one time. So we're gonna unpack it a little bit. So first response, sort of, what'd you hear in that?
Well, we watched the whole thing, I guess, last night. And so we talked about it, and I'm not sure that what I'm going to say was completely contained in what he talked there, but this dynamic between the real and the ideal, that he says we should live in the tension between those two things, that we all can't be what some of the older of us would remember as the Leave It to Beaver, Father knows best kind of great life, growing up, versus what's really happening in the world today. And so say it has to be one or the other, we still can strive for the ideal, and try to demonstrate it and make it known rather than just say, well, things are screwed up in our family. We can't be like, Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver kind of. So suburban life like that. But we can strive for that and show it to people. That thing about the kid growing up in a foster home and seeing for the first time a family sitting around the dinner table reminded me of something where a little boy came to our house when my son was about 7 or 8 years old, a friend from school, and he was going to eat supper with us and maybe spend the night. Anyway, he got his plate from the kitchen, and we were sitting down at the kitchen table, and he didn't know better but sat where I usually sat at supper, and all my children said, "That's Daddy's place," right there, because they were used to that way of being together at supper time, and so his parents were separated, and he had older brothers that played sports, and I don't think they ever sat down to a meal together. So it just made me realize that not everybody has the nuclear family that I think is ideal. I'll shut up.
I'm just going to segue a little bit on what he said about the real and ideal. The part that we didn't see, which I'm sure all of you did see, where Andy Stanley said, in the Bible, there are no perfect families. The Old Testament, and there are no ideal families. And that's why Jesus came, is to, resolve that tension and show us love, and that, we can certainly ascribe to be ideal, but we are sinners and we were born sinners, and life is real, but as long as we have Jesus's love and grace and forgiveness, then I think that motivates us to strive toward the ideal.
The theme of having family dinners has always been interesting to me. Before our first child was born, I tried to read as much as possible about how to be a good parent. And one of the articles I stumbled over talked about there's several common things of Rhodes Scholars, those that I guess are deemed fairly successful students and then go on to have a fairly successful life, however you want to define that. One of the themes was most Rhodes Scholars sat down for family dinners growing up. And I was like, okay, I can work on that because it's simple. It's something that is easy to create. And so since then, we really have tried to focus on it, keeping electronics off, and as often as possible have everybody around, even if it's just at the kitchen island around for dinner. And those little simple things, and then to hear the testimony of the gentleman Rick about how when he sat down for the first time, it gave him something to aim for, is encouraging, because the shortcomings as parents and trying to fix and create that ideal scenario that Brown just mentioned is always lingering and daunting. So keeping it simple, having the story sort of reaffirm that, yes, that's one thing that can sometimes be difficult, but is very doable. It was encouraging from the little clip for me.
I agree. I think it's very important to have dinner around the table as a family, and it's tough to do in this when we're all so busy and we have so many different activities pulling at us, and most of us are tired at night from working or whatever, and a long day with children. But looking back over time, the more you do that, the more comfortable the children are with you, and that's where we generally have our best conversations. Unfortunately, we don't do it as much as I would like, but it's a great reminder that that's something that we need to do. And I can tell you, from our experience, we've only got one child at home now, and the other two, it just goes by in a blink of an eye. And the time around the table is something that you can control and quantify, and those are the precious moments that when you look back on it, you wish you had more of.
Well, and echoing that, James, too, those are really the only times that we're all together. besides sports and then homework. And so that's if I really think about it, that is the only time that we are together as a family, is generally around the supper table. But also, I have found that we've had to be a little bit looser about, like, I'm pretty sure June Cleaver had a 6 o'clock dinner time, right? But sometimes we don't eat till 7:30 because that's the time when everybody can be there. And I know parents with young kids can't do that, but I do think you have to be a little bit more flexible in order to make that happen. You just kind of have to pick a time when everybody is going to be there, and then just make it happen. But it's definitely, I think, important and worthy. And like James said, I mean, it's the time when you find things out, and you have great conversation, or even just, goof around, which is what happens at our table a lot. But I think it's super important for sure.
Do any of y'all get your children involved in the making of dinner? Just kind of taking this dinner thing to a next step? And if so, have you found that that's a good bonding time? Are there other benefits to that from those of you that have higher education in this subject matter? Again, trying to keep things doable, but also productive, or, engaging with the children to form bonds and go towards that ideal scenario.
Our kids help, particularly the 7-year-old. She likes to come in and like stir things or like dump something in the pot. So she's interested and has gotten into it. But I would say the whole process for us of like cooking dinner, eating dinner, like we're all generally like, I don't know, within the same like general vicinity of each other. So it has been a good family time.
We started with having our child set the table, just prep for dinner, not necessarily do the food, but get the table together, put the silverware, maybe pour the drinks, whatever the case may be. And that was a good sort of entrance into that part. And sometimes we get a little help with the dinner prep, not so much anymore. Homework sort of impedes on that time and that kind of thing. But and then we sort of have tried to set the tone. Like I always, as a child, had to be asked to be excused from the table. You couldn't just eat your last bite and jump up and run off to go play or read or do whatever. And so I've sort of tried to set that same thing, take your plate, clean it, ask to be excused, and leave. Don't just abruptly get up and head out when you've eaten your last bite. So just kind of putting boundaries on either side of that time to preserve it, even if it's only 20 minutes, or you spend so much time prepping the meal and getting everything ready, and then really it's not a huge amount of time, but it's a really important part of the day. And so trying to make sure that there's some pretty firm boundaries on that time, I think, is really healthy.
And Will, I want to go back to what you said about having the child being involved with you while you're cooking. As a counselor, I have found when I'm counseling children that they're certainly more willing to talk. They're more open when they're engaged in another activity. And so sitting around the table, I think people, some kids might be like, oh God, they're going to ask me about my day or, whatever. But while they're cooking, they just seem to chat more because the focus is not really on them. There are questions being asked, but I think wonderful things come up when you're doing an activity with them, or like if you're outside walking or, whatever, that they may open up more when they feel like the attention is not on them to express themselves. So I think it's a great idea.
So we try to set up a rule: whoever helps preparing dinner does not have to clean up. So I have 4 kids, so they team up 2 by 2, and it's always interesting, and it prompts good discussion and usually some fights, but that's okay.
One thing that I've kind of picked up on this Andy Stanley today was really the idea of modeling behavior rather than telling behavior. At least for my children and for me, I do a lot better when I see other people doing things, and that's how I learn how to behave, so to speak. And my children, I can say this unequivocally, you can tell them till you're blue in the face, but they really pick up on what you do. And you don't realize it until sometimes it's too late, but you know, they're picking up more on what you're doing than what you're saying. And if you model this kind of behavior, then that's what they're going to emulate, and that's what they're going to expect is the right thing to do. So I thought that was a good point that he made, Andy Stanley.
Something that, again, not a parent, something that I thought was cool the way he talked about at the very beginning was that he like basically talked to every single parent he could get his hands on when he was like before they even had kids to like sort of figure it out. Has that been the case for y'all? Have there been people that you've encountered that have been really helpful, or advice that you were given along the way that has like completely stuck with you, like the dinner table kind of thing? Or like where have you turned to strive for that ideal, like to know where the target is?
You know,
Everywhere.
we joined the church. Brian and I we just got married, and Sunday school was kind of a new thing at Christ Church. That it was something that they didn't have, and then they kind of brought it in. And there was a class called What Really Matters at Home, and I think it was based on a book. And so Brian and I, you know, thanks, would just go sit in that class because there was nothing else for us to do. And I feel like that had a pretty big impact on us, just to hear some of the struggles and joys that a lot of these parents had. But we, you know, we didn't have kids, so we were just kind of soaking it up, just kind of observing maybe what the road ahead. So that was probably a good resource for us, because none of our kids, we were probably the first ones of our friend group to have a child, so we were going in blind for sure.
I mean, we relied on some groups of people. My husband and I are both the oldest and by many years, and so we were the first, kind of like Stacey was saying, we were the first among a lot of our friends, but also among all of our family to have children. And so yeah, we didn't have a lot of people to look to. And so when our child was really young, we had a play group of friends who also were having their first child, and you know, and I kind of relied on them. You know, that was our socialization. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, but it was also, you know, our place for advice and that kind of thing. And then as the children got older, I kind of got in with a group of other moms who also had only daughters, and that was incredibly helpful, as we all kind of determined that this one kid is the only kid we're going to have, and these are the issues we're facing, and these are the you know, the questions that we have. And I still rely on those women a lot, you know, to get advice, to answer questions, just to send them a quick text and say, hey, this is what we're facing, or this is a decision we have to make. What are you thinking about this? And just kind of as the phases go on, and we do only have the one child, we can't say, well, it worked this way the first time around, where everything's new, you know, every time it's always new. And so you know, we rely on one another, and I think that's been incredibly helpful. And those are friends from church and also from the community, from school and that kind of thing. So kind of melding those groups together has been really enriching as well.
Elizabeth is much better at seeking advice and building a network and a community of people to ask questions of, and she does a great job of that. Is not scared to share any situation in our family or any dynamic with our children with other people. And I know sometimes it seems like people are a little hesitant saying, oh my God, I can't believe my kid did that. I'm not going to tell anybody, you know, whereas Elizabeth has no qualms about saying, well, you know, my child did so-and-so, and I know you think that that's the worst thing that has ever happened, but for us, that's just a day in our life. And, you know, that humility and being able to be honest and saying, you know, this is what my kid did, and what do we do about it? I think that that opens up a lot of clear, open, honest dialogue with people. And that has gone a long way with our friends being honest with us and saying, I can't believe you told us that, but you know what? My child did that 2 years ago, and this is what we did. And I've never told anybody. So I think that, you know, when you have that support group, I mean, just being honest with them, and, you know, kids will do the darndest things, and we as parents do the darndest things. I was racking my brain. I can't remember who gave us this advice, and it might've been my in-laws, but they told us at one point, they said, you know, look, there is no perfection in parenting, and you have to give yourselves a lot of grace, because you're going to get a lot of it wrong, but kids are resilient. You just do the best you can, just shower them with love, and, you know, don't beat yourself up too badly if you think you messed up, because you probably didn't.
I told
wanna,
Daddy,
we only have a couple of minutes left, and we haven't really talked too much about marriage, which was sort of like the point of this section of the video they watched today. So was there anything that you heard from him talking about marriage, talking about family, that you wanted to, I want to make sure we have space for that this morning. Sorry, Chantal.
No, I told you I was going to be quiet, but I was just going to bring up that idea of the perfect marriage, being the perfect parent. And, you know, when you hear other people talking about parenting, it's all, you know, you always feel like they're the perfect parent and that they have the perfect marriage. And there's a lot of pressure with that. And when I was listening to the video earlier, and I missed some parts, but in my mind, I was just thinking about a phone call that I got from a friend of mine, and she's having issues with her, with her marriage right now. And she was sharing that with me, but and I just told her, you know, you're a good mom. And that is when she broke into tears, because she was having issues with her marriage. She thought she was failing as a mom. And I thought that was, I mean, to me, that was heartbreaking, but that's when she, you know, she was in tears and she could not talk anymore. And, you know, we worked through it, but still it showed that there was a lot of pressure on her to keep the image of a good marriage and to keep her marriage going, because, you know, that's what she defined as being a good mom. So I'm just putting that out there.
I think for marriage, for us anyway, I mean, we have to be a team. We have to be on the same page, and we have to be consistent in our parenting values. We did a Bible study a while back with a preacher that wasn't at Christ Church, and one of the things that he really hammered home to us was that he said, look, y'all are a unit together, and you have to be that unit first. He said, you know, you chose each other. The kids came second. And he said, in his experience, he's seen a lot of families that put their kids first once they have children. And he said, that is, in his opinion, not the way to go. And he said, biblically, that is certainly not the way to go. He said, if you put your spouse first and your marriage first, and then your children, then you're going to have more of a steady relationship with your children, and you're going to develop them better.
This doesn't really track exactly with what Andy Stanley was saying, but I hope that we can still have room for all the single parents that are out there, not by their own choice or by their own desires, that are still there trying to do that, that don't have a marriage to, I mean, obviously marriage is sort of becoming less and less common in America, they say. But, you know, I liked everything I heard from Andy Stanley, but, you know, a lot of people in America that didn't grow up with two parents and are now parenting alone. So they don't have that example to see. So I don't have the answer to that, but I just an observation.
In our house, our experience is a little bit different because we are, you know, we have a special needs child who spends a lot of the time at the center of our attention, whether we want it or not. And so Brian and I laugh. I mean, if he ever leaves me, I'm going to go find him because we can't do this alone. And we recognize that. And it's been interesting because as Emma and Sam have grown, they recognize it too. And so we are very much an all for one, one for all family. I know I'm getting emotional. But anyway, I definitely think a team is important. And I've enjoyed having Em and Sam on our team too. I mean, now we're just, you know, Team Nixon, getting it done however we can manage to get it done. And but certainly working on the marriage is important. And Emma and Sam recognize that now too. Like, they'll be like, why don't you two go have a date night? We've got this. We'll keep you, you know, we'll keep married. And so I do think that we have done something right in that respect, that they maybe recognize that. And hopefully we've modeled well for them. But I do think it's important for parents to be a team and to show solidarity and support each other, whether they don't necessarily agree with the decisions that the other one made, saying yes when they really think they should have said no, or because you know, sometimes you get cornered and you make the decision and maybe it's not the right one, but you still have to back that other person out. But I thought Andy took a little bit of a strong line on the whole. Sometimes the best thing for a family, I think, is maybe not to model a dysfunctional marriage, you know? I mean, so I thought that was a little bit of a hard line that Andy took. But anyway, I definitely think that single parents can model very well for children. But that was a rambling, but I definitely think taking care of your marriage is important. It's a model for your children for sure.
Yeah, we've had to go to the extent of expressly saying, you know, this is, if you know, if we're to go out of town for a weekend or something like that, our kid doesn't want us to go without her. You know, she thinks that, you know, it's funny, I don't know, a year or two ago, a friend has an only child who's a few years younger than ours, and she sent me this article from, I think it was Time Magazine or something like that, and the title of the article was, "There's a third person in our marriage and it's our child," you know. And I think that that's a tendency that happens because there is just the three of us, and so it's easier to make three people a single unit rather than like the kid unit and the parent unit, you know. And so we've struggled with that a little bit to try to set some boundaries and say, you know, mommy and daddy need to be having time to talk and have discussions and stuff. And especially this year with us all being home together all the time. Back in the fall, we said, well, we're going to go camping for a weekend, just the two of us. You're going to stay here with your grandparents. And And that was a huge challenge because it hadn't happened in so long because we hadn't been able to travel or do anything. And just being expressly and intentional about having that time away and having that time to build your partnership and spend time alone as adults to have conversations and be together and enjoy each other is really important. So we've made it very transparent that that's something that's important to us and that it's healthy for everybody. And our child needs time away from us too. That's also good in character building and helping her to grow up and those kinds of things as well.
Interesting you mentioned that. Lauren and I have just finished a 16-week, it's called Re-Engage Marriage. I don't know the right word for it, but it was a program that, was it First Pres put on?
Yeah.
Yeah, First Pres. But anyway, it was great. And it was every Wednesday night, and we did it in person. And the first couple of Wednesdays, the kids didn't want us to leave, and Lauren and I were feeling a little guilty about it. And sitter was coming, and by the end, they were asking us when the sitter's coming back and when we were going to go out. And it made me realize that
They're fun.
they're totally good.
And that's exactly what I was about to say too. That's what it made me think about that. I think for me, it's harder. Like when we go on trips and leave the kids with grandparents, I stress out about them getting homesick. And, Will has to remind me that sometimes even for me, it's good to leave them with the sitters and know that they're going to be okay, that I don't always have to be there. So I think all around, it's good to have adult time.
We had to force ourselves into it, but now I don't know that we would go back. I mean,
Yeah, it's good for everyone.
date night every week if we can.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Our parents are in Aiken, so it's a little harder to arrange some things. Like we definitely can't do things during the week quite as easily. But I can tell how much they love being with their grandparents, like for the weekend or something, or even for a week. If we get really lucky and can get that much time away. But I do think it's good for everybody. And especially when they were really little, it was hard because that guilt is real. But as they've gotten older, they're able to talk to us about how much they're looking forward to it. And so I just feel like it's good for all of us. Isn't it?
Well, I am going to call us for time, but this has been a really great discussion. Thanks for participating, whether you're actually here right now, if you're watching this recording later. Yeah, it's been great. We'll pick back up next week with a new video from him. This is part of a series. So if you can tell from the dramatic music at the end of the last clip, that was transitioning to some worship that we skipped out on. You're welcome to go back and watch it. They have a lovely band. But we'll start back up with sort of part 2, which gets more into the meat of a parenting class that you'd expect. But I think we've laid a good sort of foundation here. So I am going to close us in prayer. So the Lord be with you. Almighty God, Heavenly Father, you have blessed us with the joy and care of children. Give us calm strength and patient wisdom as we bring them up, that we may teach them to love whatever is just and true and good, following the example of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank
We'll
you,
see you all
Abby.
next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for a good week.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.